All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a concept that's, well, it's going to fundamentally transform your performance. We're looking way past those external numbers, the metrics the spreadsheets usually stare at. Instead, we're peering directly into the internal mirror. Whether you're a trader, an executive, or really anyone making high-stakes decisions under pressure, the numbers, they only tell half the story. The other half, and honestly, the way more important half, is what's going on inside your head right before you make that decision. So let's kick things off with a pretty crucial question about your daily tracking habits. It's actually a question that most high-pressure decision makers completely shy away from. Ask yourself right now, are you keeping a log or are you keeping a mirror? Think about it. Most people who track their performance are just keeping a log. They track the entry, the exit, the profit, the loss, maybe the setup and time frame. And hey, while that's super useful, it's also fundamentally incomplete. Think about a traditional log, kind of like a receipt, right? A receipt proves what happened and what it cost you. It's completely surface level. It basically just tells you, hey, this trade lost or this decision failed. But a mirror reveals who made the decision. It documents your internal state, the intense pressure you were under, and the underlying beliefs actually driving your actions. So the log tells you what happened, but the mirror tells you exactly why your execution was compromised before you even made a move. It's a total game changer. Now, to understand why the mirror is absolutely crucial, we got to look at how we actually process emotions. See, we often let vague feelings, anxiety, boredom, or just that desperate itch to feel productive, we let them hover over our decisions. But here is the profound truth. As long as they stay just feelings, they remain vague. They are completely unworkable. I mean, you can't fix a phantom. You just can't optimize a vague sense of unease. And there's actually hard science backing this up. Psychologist James Pennebaker has done over 4 decades of research on expressive writing. 4 decades. And he proved that the simple act of translating an internal state into precise language forces a level of self-observation that just thinking about it cannot produce. So when you actually write down, I entered this trade because I was terrified of having 0 trades today, you take this vague, recurring anxiety and boom, you turn it into a specific, nameable, and workable event. Writing isn't magic, right? It's just a mechanism for unmatched clarity. Moving from modern science to ancient Stoicism, we actually find the exact same principle at work. This is fascinating to me. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations is arguably the greatest psychology document ever written. I mean, here's a guy writing about governing himself under the sustained, literal crushing pressure of leading an entire empire. And every single day in private, he wrote about his failures, his distractions, his impatience. But he wasn't doing this to confess his sins. No, he wrote about them to see them clearly. Because once a thing is seen clearly, you can finally change it. So, how does this written practice actually function? Well, it requires 2 distinct directions. First, you need a backward-looking examination. That's just an honest review of yesterday's gap between your standard and your actual behavior. Second, you need a forward-looking commitment. This is a deliberate, daily recalibration of your compass before the day's pressure even hits. Without that forward commitment, looking back is really just useless self-criticism. And without looking back, your forward commitment is basically just an empty aspiration. You absolutely need both of them to close the gap between who you are and who you want to be. Before we get into the exact application, let me be super clear about something. Please, do not throw away your spreadsheets. The Mirror Journal is not a replacement for your standard performance log. Actually, it's exactly what your log has been missing all along. You're finally adding that critical internal layer, the deep why beneath the surface level what. Okay, let's move to the actionable framework and see how this builds into a complete written system for every single session. We've broken this down into a highly efficient 5-step process: the pre-session state, the live observation, the post-session mirror, the weekly synthesis, and finally, the monthly audit. This is exactly how you build an instrument of absolute self-knowledge. Step 1 is the pre-session state. Now, this takes just 4 minutes before the market or your workday even opens. You're just writing down 3 to 5 sentences to evaluate your physical, emotional, and mental state, along with one specific behavioral intent. Ask yourself, are you carrying the residue of yesterday's loss? Are you exhausted? Write it down. It creates a baseline snapshot of your internal environment before the external pressure has any chance to mess with it. It basically sets the baseline against which all of your behavior that day is going to be measured. Moving on to step 2, the live observation. Now, don't worry, you aren't writing after every single tick of the clock. You just do this during or immediately after significant decisions, like entries, exits, or trades you specifically decided to skip. You write just 3 concise sentences documenting your physical state, your primary thought, and, crucially, whether your decision was driven by your established plan or by a sudden feeling. You really have to ask yourself, did I enter this trade because my setup triggered, or did I enter because my heart started pounding and I felt this sudden wave of FOMO? Step 3 is the post-session mirror. Now, this must be written within 30 minutes of your session closing. Honestly, this is the absolute most vital section of the daily practice. You're pinpointing exactly where your behavior deviated from your plan. And here's the golden rule. You must identify exactly what you felt in the 3 seconds right before that deviation occurred. What is that recurring state that precedes your recurring mistakes? Because once you know that, you can commit to one specific, executable behavioral difference for your very next session. Then, in step 4, the weekly synthesis, we rely heavily on the power of the number 3. Once a week, you review your daily entries with one specific goal in mind. Identify the 3 most frequent internal states that preceded your 3 most frequent mistakes. Notice how we're focusing on the internal states here, not just the mistakes themselves. That's because the internal state is the upstream variable. If you change the state, or at least build a solid defense against it, the mistake naturally loses its primary cause. Finally, step 5 scales this whole thing out to a monthly audit. But this isn't an audit of your win rate, it's an audit where you interrogate your own internal patterns. You ask yourself things like, which underlying belief appeared most frequently? What exact emotion preceded my most expensive, costly decisions? And, most importantly, what has changed about my internal landscape compared to 30 days ago? Guys, this is how you track true psychological growth. To wrap this explainer up, let's just look at a universal truth. It's universally understood that the market, or really whatever competitive environment you operate in, is a flawless instrument for reflecting results. It will ruthlessly show you exactly what happened and what it cost you. But the thing is, it's entirely reactive. However, building your own mirror journal shifts you from being purely reactive to being completely proactive. The mirror shows you who made it happen. It doesn't wait for the market to show you who you are. It shows you before you even sit down at your desk. It allows you to decide deliberately, specifically, and with full information exactly who you are going to be when the pressure finally hits. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought today. When was the last time you wrote about what you felt in the 3 seconds before making a major decision? And I don't mean what you decided, but what you actually felt. Well, if your answer is never, then you're really only keeping a log of what the world did to you. So here's my challenge to you. Write just 3 sentences today after your first significant decision. Begin this practice and finally start having the most honest daily conversation with the only person whose behavior you actually control.